This week we come to the end of the book of Genesis with the portion VaYechi. Like the portion Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah, VaYechi means and he lived, and it discusses, of course, at the end of the portion, both the death of Jacob and the death of Joseph, concluding this beautiful section of the book of Genesis that began with chapter 37, which is really a literary unit all to itself. As we conclude the book of Genesis, 50 chapters, we ask the question, how does this entire book relate to what we think the Torah is? In other words, Torah is Hebrew for instruction, and so we expect the entire Torah to contain the instructions and commandments for us by which to lead our lives. Or we would expect that the Torah would provide us a guideline on how to believe in God, to teach us what God is, and to teach us ways in which we can communicate with God. The book of Genesis is neither one of those. That began with, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, implying that we already know that God exists, and doesn't bother teaching us about the nature of God specifically. We only learn about God's nature through the stories of the book itself. Also, it's assumed that the people in the Torah know what God is and who God is. Adam and Eve in the garden have an encounter with God. They hear God walking through the garden without even understanding, wait a second, what is that sound? What are we hearing? What is this? No, according to the story, Adam and Eve know who God is. God speaks to Noah, and Noah also isn't surprised about God speaking to him. The same with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, etc. So it's fascinating that the Torah begins already with the assumption that we know what God is and we know how to communicate with God, and that we should expect God to communicate with us. And so, though we transition next week to the book of Exodus, where we will have the dramatic story of the Exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, and then get into really what the Torah is, a whole list of instructions and commandments and guidelines, we need the book of Genesis also to round out for us the bigger picture of what we understand the Torah to be, namely a book that really explains and responds to regular life. The book of Genesis is a story of regular people who happen to have serious and profound encounters with God. And if they can do that, people who are flawed in character can rise above and become greater people. Then the message is, so can we and so should we. Shabbat Shalom.